Hello, this is an important announcement, fellow YouTubers and humanity. And then hyper additionally, where we are assignments as uses of our names A through Z, through and as systems tactically ulterior from the one that has assigned. All answers that are perfect as itself. And those perfect answers are better than perfect because they reveal revelations and other natures of answers, means out of nowhere. So we have the suburbs in America designed before America's founders were born, designed for a torture, extortion, slavery method. Means to deny that our styles of logic and or our nature of logic used by a breaching method to hide behind. This only allowed. See, forgiveness is where there is guilt, for example, where and how it is discernible with using the hyper evidential, so to speak. I am not a lawyer. We have black pupils, whites of eyes, the same color eyes at the same time, while different color eyes at the same time, per nature itself. In other words, as an answer, as what's generating revelation. In other words, more answers, means to fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere, including especially regarding some ways how we are fact sheeping nature. And the difference between that with a special difference, nature uses a special difference in ways we are not allowed to appreciate because we have offensively, simultaneously criminally foreign influence / hyper criminally foreign influence and tactically delusions raw. Experts on logic and reason, black pupils. It is time. So part of the way they got away with the forgiveness is because it backed each age and nature of sophistication. In other words, per nature, as nature, what is true always, not denying the slightest exception. And it fit roles with predicate acts with facts, replacing what nature communicates simultaneously. If it rolls with it forced, otherwise that body was sensed, including if it was a majority of people, including if it was everyone. So this maintained roles, needs, natures, and styles, blaming other things, others, ourselves for the real causes of negative value, nature, progressions, acts, and natures. Long before each modern country's, Russia was a country long before us. And so was China, but already the names of A through Z from semi-ancient times had become forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to defend themselves as fact-sheeping nature from simultaneously physical and nature impositions as criminal insidiousness, nature / hyper-criminal insidiousness. I am not a lawyer, I'm not a police officer, I'm not a criminal. We have hyper-evidential means to observe all sides in cases, criminal and civil, and the names with both, and the lawyers or the courts themselves. And the difference between that or the people on and off or next to the corrections offices, on and off next to the state judicial branch offices. This is a and their use of other names is a quality of fact-sheeping nature that is forced. That is three ways manifest as criminal insidiousness / hyper-criminal insidiousness. Per science, I don't have to be a lawyer. And so many people in the suburbs and in the cities were given by nature means to discern this better. Because, in other words, and the breaching method knew it would be that way. It discerned and appreciated this and its relativity to us with all questions we have naturally and all exceptions at all locations / s. Every single place the human species body has a name. It is critical to understand how we've been used as systems tactical ulterior from its own. How styles and natures. So a football team has styles, but it's not because in other words, even an offensive or defensive line person has tasks that are different, forced by the nature of the game and by nature itself. Just like in boxing, one is forced by nature itself to develop a style. In general, lifting one's hands. And boxing, martial arts, and wrestling are about fighting, but they're about by the rules. How are you? Welcome, Green King. So boxing, martial arts, and wrestling are about fighting, but they're about fighting by the rules. But the rules have been abridged since semi-ancient times. That we are taught to refer to as ancient times, and/or the nature of the debate regarding that or anything else. It contains quality aspects of nature. That is collusion/S in ways that not one person fathomed. And where they could try to fathom it, if they're trying to entertain, for example, pretending that any branch of government, any legal voice, private or other, or any opinion nature, spoke for this properly, black and white. It was assigned by a breaching method that forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded everyone to entertain and to use syntax and roles with its function/S by worse than just slavery simultaneously, stacked worse than just torture, stacked and extortion against every single person sickly distinctly, even who it hurt the least and helped out. And that's also because from off locations A through Z, not just the name of the scientific value of a human fact-checking nature breaching method is and has been left out. America's founders communicated for us not to leave out the scientific value of the breaching method. They communicated also for us not to leave out who would pretend that's debatable and refer to text and self-value, where and how originally instilled. For example, courts force a quality of fact-checking nature at the last second back and forth with issues where they self-value and have self-value, collusions at all natures of crime scenes as a certain type of victim/hyper victim that was raised, where this method measures and maintains. Other communicated for our founders, then our founders communicated, even if we don't know about that. Just even with the messed up American history takes, A through Z, too, the difference of that is also measured and maintains self-value roles, self-cultivating roles with it, which is simultaneously roles with use/S of it, per breaching method, a predicate acts with facts delivery system method, and/or a criminal insidiousness nature delivery system method, relative also to the motivations for the agencies to have an extent of their roles through the sales of businesses, including internet, like Facebook has roles with their own leadership people and with their campuses names. In other words, these companies, there are names like police. There are police families and judicial families, but they never stop being used criminally for an influence. The difference of their roles with the overt criminal enterprises and private ones. Nature shows us means to discern that they have countered criminal enterprises wrong, terrorists wrong. See how, in other words, both parties have recorded worse than criminal incompetence that we could fix, that we could show them it. And in other words, with use of words like extremism or radical as collusion/S, also used for the worst collusion/S that is directly relative to where and to how and why. How we have black people's rights values, how it communicates with an identity of hyper-relativity, how that is replaced, and how, in other words, the nature of what appears to be debatable is used to hide behind. Our founders communicated for us not to leave out how the breaching method more so employed the economy than slash economies than they did or than we did, and more so than the countries that it was leveraged through. Northern colonies and southern colonies were still the possession slash S of more than 13. There were more than 13 colonies. They were still the possession, north and south. There still rules with that slavery method, sickly distinctly entrenched, but sickly non-distinctly too, because of how the breaching method uses and used how we are individuals grouped, any grouping that forms, and humanity voicings, again, as systems measured and maintained, self-cultivated roles with its, within as voicings, tactical ulterior than our nature communicates. And we have that entertained because we have subject treatments, guns. This, one of the things that's tied to it is predicate acts with facts methods, mass evidence. When little kid at each age of fact treating nature, there are people who walk up to others with questions. This is also being and has been pretended because they do the opposite. There are fake things put in databases on a mass scale. Relative, if anyone's going to communicate about this, because the breaching method knew that increasingly people that went to campuses we were at, or people just went, the exceptions are faked too. People are influenced to walk near you, and other people take pictures, but they pretend people are liars or not, or truth tellers. And the difference of that, they're also being used with the difference of that. The Americans and Saudis, we know Saudi attackers and Americans had roles with the World Trade Center attack and the spots next to it with predicate acts. See, if we don't address predicate acts with facts, I saw real quick on Fox News, MSNBC, or CNN, there was I believe it was a representative who was speaking, we're going to put 10 years in jail if you're caught making a school threat. See, these are predicate acts with facts, evidence racketeering, and cover-ups, because they were shown and are shown they need to hide lie progressions based on where and how people speak for the law, including how they're taught to at campuses, that the campuses have stayed criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, functions as tactical ulterior from the nature system that America's republic was revealed to be led by, with its campuses systems. Otherwise, nature demonstrates negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, but then the sciences became criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, and self-valued roles not realizing, because the breaching method most probably, demonstrably, forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded countries A through Z, and the phenomenon of names they came from, to blame other things, others, or selves for the real causes of negative value nature, progressions, acts, and natures that had to be countered, like predicate acts, and like natures like criminal insidiousness natures, wrongdoers, wrongdoing, and especially relative to the differences, like black and white. These are the two colors that show us that these are the colors we have common. This is what we have, the same color eyes. And we have this course, in other words, we have religious rights prevented. And then we have the nature debate regarding that, used to measure and maintain collusion /S with recorded clearer than day. Each age of fact should be nature is tactically self-valuing like projections as the integrity of the branches, as criminal insidiousness nature. In other words, and styles of logic that can't put that on paper. So in our faces, they have the political parties, individual voices. Before they become an individual voice, those parties were already roles with locations, areas, and states still used remotely by the breaching method entrenched that measures and maintains roles self-valued, communicating other than what James Madison and our founders behind him communicated for us to communicate about our founders behind him and his plan. And then how they went and got George Washington to agree. And see why and how they don't understand these things at young ages. Nature shows us, and our founders showed us with president/chief, for example. Native Americans are 1/3 of our founders too. 1/3 are the founders. The way we know, although their communications are changed, their identities are stolen in our faces and through ourselves. And this breaching method knew that it could make styles, logics, nature, uses of identity, title values that are going to pretend other, and it hands them the ways, the syntax to get away with it, which is increasingly just wasting time. There are obligations by nature itself and by the Constitution unabridged that dictate that both parties want this, but you have to make both parties individuals want this, but you have to release them from the actual crazy. The names of those leaders and the names of those parties, their difference is used where a certain type of victim/hyper victim didn't and doesn't know how to react, where how from off campuses collusions are maintained with where and how it's relative that a whole bunch of countries that have nuclear weapons pointed at each other are the same ones who have collusions with all kinds of predicate acts with facts on off campuses together. And when they speak about money. This is part of the reason we have the problem with economies. They are offensively involved with a torture, extortion, slavery method, and self-valued roles. So good people were made and kept evil. They've been faking transcripts and databases on a mass scale, and as roles with lie progressions. Per this method that knew that there would be people that would never forget where and how this breaching method sensed from other classrooms and from off campuses, people who would put short words and nature and description of American history as we could actually discern it. Black pupils. In other words, they're pretending things are debatable that aren't on a mass scale. They have the campuses involved with this. On a mass scale, campuses that are filmed 24/7, you think that would save our kids? They're locking rules with predicate acts, with facts, methods, self-value, or that person's sense, including if it's a majority of people, including if it is everybody, Black people. So we don't have time to wait for the sciences and or for the interbranch. So all sides of criminal and civil cases and the differences of those names, their lawyers, their family members, the same thing with the courts. They have been placed in the same sequence shifts. They have collusions with other people using everyone's name remotely, like including next to the court, next to the World Trade Center attack that day, and spots next to it and in it. Wethersfield police recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There's Joshua. There's people with the name Scalora involved with child offenders with them, switching and forging names, and they forced a principal child offender and they pretended other, and they fabricate and change what's recorded digital and mail evidences and physical evidences. Have roles with predicate acts of all different natures, intercities, and they were all brought up at once, tied to the same house slash S that recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Since I was a kid, they were involved with behavior racketeering, criminally foreign influence, planting fake evidences, roles with all sides of criminal and civil cases, and their cousins involved with the World Trade Center attack forced Saudis to collusions with them. And the Saudi attackers forced collusions too, including a King family, and the difference of that was is used per their neighbors. There are neighbors of a King family and people tied to them who have roles of wire crimes in Wethersfield police who are refusing to identify themselves. Now, television judges have self-valued roles. And now, part of the reason self-valued is because other people are monitoring what's said on social media and the value of that. The Hartford New Britain Superior Court's Facebook page, Hartford Court's Facebook page, and campus's Facebook pages have, and medical, Hartford Hospital has roles with digital police and foreign and domestic military involved with child offenders, sexual, medical, overt criminal enterprises, private ones. A whole bunch of people with the name tied to the name Lombardo too are involved with people with the Connecticut's the town offices, but also all locations slash S, but also the community center. They have sequence shifts their roles there, and take pictures, make it look like people had verbal conversations roles. As people involved with the spots next to the state capitol, increasingly involved with uses of corners of streets on my street, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Former director of the FBI, Robert Lusk, and his co-defendants and their neighbors are increasingly involved with a whole bunch of judges and prosecutors with the same house near me, involved with retired police chiefs from Wethersfield, who are involved with identity theft, fraud, slander, and worse than extortion, torture, and slavery every year of my life. They've been putting fake things they won't get on paper, leading up to the World Trade Center attack, in it and since. It's people on off the state corrections offices. One of the women teachers is recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with people with the name Cuddy, a Lance Cuddy, and others next to him, and others associated with him are recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed on off the state of Connecticut corrections offices, involved with more sexual and medical offenders of kids, and with mayors involved through time, and teachers I had where they're putting fake things in the background, and they involve the kids of leaders of the kids increasingly, more with the principal. There's a I never had a problem. I barely knew Mr. Murphy. In other words, the only time I had, well, in other words, there are people telling lies to Mr. Murphy, and then his daughter too. His daughter has a whole bunch of doctors that have been fabricating. His daughter had a boyfriend named Kevin Harris, per Rick Cianfaglione, as one of the ones involved with an O'Brien and a Cololo and a Smith family, with wire crimes and falsified police reports, and with people that know my name that I don't know their name, and a whole bunch of people at Hartford Hospital's Institute of Living, and the houses and businesses next to it, and all along that route, also with and as names next to intelligence and news locations that are involved with planting evidences on collusion slash S on all natures of locations and crime scenes, including per roles with use slash S of that to increasingly screen use slash S of that. So in other words, one of the things we're going to observe how a predicate acts with facts delivery system method is behind this. We're going to observe how, where, and how really. See, Judge Napolitano knows a whole bunch of things more about the law than me. Judge Janine Pirro does. But me and kids in New York City, kids across the world, even kids, let alone adults, who've been paying attention since we were kids, to the black pupils, whites of eyes, and means to discern by what is true always, not denying the slightest sequence shift. For example, we appreciated there was a breaching method sickly distinctly against the Native Americans, sickly distinctly against the colonists, sickly distinctly against the early states, sickly distinctly against ourselves. We have the suburbs that were set up for this torture, extortion, slavery method, manifest as an identity theft, fraud, slander method. Black pupils, we could force a quality of fact, cheaping nature. See how they want to put 10 years in jail someone for making a threat on a school? The schools are being and have been used to plant faked and changed audio and video transcripts because they know those are the kind of details people leave out before they take oaths. They have roles of predicate acts with facts, natures of identity theft, fraud, slander, behavior racketeering, fake motivations too, including real ones apparent and real, are juxtaposed, though. This breaching method propagated that only allowed or that body would be sensed, including if it is a majority of people, including if it is everyone. So, thank you, people. In other words, someone please ask Fox News, CNN, or MSNBC to follow mandated law, because through administrations their help is recorded involved with intercampuses of each age and nature. There is a increasingly people with a state police place on the Berlin Turnpike involved with the Eric Jensen and people with the name Tomorrow, involved with the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants, who also have sexual and medical abuses of kids with overt criminal enterprises, and judges, including female judges, switching and forging names and preventing paper to put more fake things to cover up how they've been doing that since the founding. Force equality of fact, cheaping nature at all formal locations, that is collusion with that which is at all locations, overtly / insidiously. Criminally foreign influence / hypercriminally foreign influence. And the difference of that is used too, individually grouped in together, with all humanity voicings, which behind their logic and nature, styles forced by nature itself. We could examine this, we could turn the worst negatives into the greatest hyper positives. This breaching method knew that only would be capable of all formal, private, is trying to turn the worst negatives or negatives into criminal insidiousness natures of positives. Vaccines. That's why and how people keep bringing up when they bring up the border, they're being used to measure and maintain by a breaching method, leaving itself out and its roles with the borders problems every modern country has. It's relative to us being systems tactical ulterior from the one that has cell body, cell nucleus, cell wall / S manifest, how it does. It is the one that is distinctly, non-distinctly, and is simultaneously itself, being how time is grouped 3 ways in projection to us. As time we know is true always from the past. Time that we know to an extent now is true always. The value and as value, where value is nature / nature is value. And the seasons, the value of the seasons, we know an extent of the future now. We know there was time before this that we don't know about, but we know it was there, and we know there's time that was. And so there are 5 parts of forever nature's complete body, and it's also just distinctly grouped 3 ways. And when we examine this, the difference of it is also value. It is a trinity, not juxtaposed completely, where it won't mix with the individual, the grouped nature of itself. Is a third of itself, the identity of the hyper-simultaneous. That is active identity relationships between the part that will only gain and be volume as grouped And so the way it has, just like ourselves, we have different parts of ourselves that are valued distinctly, especially differentially. Everything is communicating about its use of a special difference, for example, to demonstrate Earth's and our own and other species' bodies that come with where and how it communicates to us. So it shows us. The other species' bodies have the same quality aspects in nature: two eyes, consciousness, even the bugs. It shows us that they didn't invent that, we didn't invent that. And note when you hear people, oh, that's God, it's either God or not. See, there are people that are leaving the Trinity out and pretending other because the remote use of difference /s. There are people, a whole bunch of people tied to and as one's name Leahy. I don't know where they live in Weathersfield. I never had a class with them. I saw them in a hallway. Their name was repeated to me. A couple of times I saw it to make a fake exception. These are people involved with the medical community, with foreign and domestic military, Koreans, people with the name, Koreans, Italians, Irish, mayors. These are medical offenders of kids putting in with forging foreign doctors' names. And these are intelligence families. All kinds of wire and mail crime methods, roles, self-valued with the FBI, CIA, military, because we're where and how they use self-value. Only when anyone ever heard, be a fake when you speak for law. Its name's difference /s. It's because they still have roles with uses of our own at all location, where they're speaking other than nature was and is communicating to us. And how, in other words, so it's important to get them to identify themselves. They are recorded needing to lie too. In other words, I don't know what. In other words, we have no security at countries A through Z because there's remote uses of their narratives, even regarding the value of the suburbs, which is inseparable from their roles with the nature debate regarding the suits and ties counters and exceptions. Also leaving and having left out the black pupils' rights of eyes and the breaching methods assignment of it, let alone we're communicating other than nature does with it. We're leaving out how the breaching method assigned that only allowed. And or roles blaming other things, others, ourselves for its roles, forcing and having forced that, just like the nature of the suburbs and our means to it, just like the real cause of poverty. Fear God. Thank you, people. Lieutenant.